is not out of question that the Red Blacks can make the playoffs, but they need to start to play some better football starting this Thursday when they will host the Calgary Stampeders. Right now, joining us on the Gabriel Pizza Hotline is our Red Blacks pre- and post-game analyst. We say hello and good morning to Duke Ellingson. How you doing, Duke?
Good morning, JR. I hope you had a good week off.
Oh, I had good weeks off, Duke.
Week.
Many weeks
multiple.
off. Yes.
Multiple weeks. All right.
Well, you've been on, and I haven't been on, so that should lead you. Apparently, I'm so immemorable, if that's a word, that Duke didn't even recognize the fact that I was away for a couple of weeks. But that's good. Maybe
you know what? It's partially because I see you. You're still doing your spotting duties at the game. So
that's
I saw you, right? So it kind of I get my little JR fix.
Yeah, good point by you on this one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you spend the couple of weeks I was away? Have you fixed the Red Blacks? At least in your mind, have you found a way to fix the Red Blacks?
I've been grinding as well.
Okay.
On tape, yeah, no, for sure. It's funny just to hear Bob Dice say that because I think that was where I kind of left off after the Hamilton game was just sort of, either this team doesn't have enough talent. As I look around the league and compare, I think, maybe there's a case to be made that I thought they were maybe better than they are talent-wise. Now, of course, the injuries have played a role in that. But then second of all, it definitely feels to me like, kind of getting out-coached, or the philosophy of the coaching staff is just, in my mind, way too conservative. I watched, all the games last week. I watched all the games this past weekend, and there's so many big plays. There's so many teams, doing creative things on offense, and so many explosive plays happening all around the league, and it feels like Ottawa's being left behind. And so I'm glad to hear Bob Dice talk about the fact that, maybe where they need to look is not so much in, the players or anything like that, but it's really scheme, it's attitude, philosophy, aggressiveness, whatever that looks like. And I'm glad to hear that the coaches are sort of self-scouting over the bye week.
Well, it didn't seem like typically when a team is in as bad a place as the Red Blacks are and they have a bye week, that's like, well, if they don't change out the coach, which Sean Burke said last week, we're not doing that. Often you will see, okay, there's a bunch of players that are getting released. There's a bunch of players. There really wasn't, I don't even know if there's a list of anybody that's been let go. And so they obviously feel like the solution is in-house. And a lot of self-scouting happened. You mentioned that the conservative nature of the play calling on offense. How much of that do you think is due to the fact that Drew Brown, unfortunately, has been injured for, about 50% of the game so far, and the offensive line has not been able to hold up through the injuries? Is how much, I'll ask specifically about the offensive line. How much do you think you can pin it on the ineffectiveness as a whole of that unit so far?
Well, I'm not entirely sure that that's been a glaring problem. I mean, let's face it, they don't have their starting group and haven't had the one they envisioned in training camp yet. Hopefully, Godberg can get back soon and be the center that they need, and then everybody else kind of fans out to the right spots and they stay healthy. But if you look back and you look at a couple of the games, obviously the Calgary game out there where they rushed for over 200 yards, and Stanback and Adebaboye have had 5-yard plus rushing averages. So it's not like they've just been stymied, and I don't feel like pressure and sacks. I mean, obviously there's a few glaring exceptions to that, but it hasn't been a massive problem. And I think if I look around the league, every team has struggled with offensive line injuries. Many teams have not had their starting quarterbacks play every game, and yet you still see, I think, some relatively explosive kind of offenses. So, yeah, I don't know if the play calling is a result of the fact that they don't have a great trust in the O-line, or if it really is just Tommy Condell's style to be, super conservative and try to be methodical in how he calls plays. And as a result, they're not making enough of those plays to give themselves chances in games.
Right. I think it's more than fair to say that Bob Dice is a conservative coach. And that's not a criticism. That's just like if you watch the games, I think it's more than fair to say that is his nature. In your time in playing in the league, and obviously now being, an observer of the league for many years, how often does if any, the coach dictate to, in this case, the offensive coordinator, this is the style I want our offense to have, or does he literally, for the most part, leave it in the hands of the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's probably more of the former, that when things and you know, you made a really good point, right? Typically, what we see in the CFL, especially as you get towards September, and teams are struggling, is the airlift of players, and you know, they kind of pin it all on the players, and off those guys go, and you start over again, and it never seems to work. In other cases, I do think there's conversations, and I think it's the right one to have with Tommy Condell, is just to unleash a little bit more of some creativity and aggressiveness in the play calling, and taking some shots down the field. I mean, they've got some players, Justin Hardy and Eugene Lewis, I think prime among them, that are very capable of catching contested balls and making plays where maybe the guys, you know, they aren't wide open, and just giving those guys opportunities to make plays. So I do think that conversation happens quite regularly when teams aren't playing particularly well, and they give the offensive coordinator or the defensive coordinator a chance to say, let me kind of refine what I want to do, and maybe a little bit out of my own comfort zone, and call plays that maybe play more to the strengths of the guys that I've got on the field.
You mentioned that in watching around the league, how many big plays there are, explosives they call it, and it seems like most other teams are getting their fair share, and the Red Blacks aren't at this stage. One of the things that it was interesting to me to read as people were assessing offseason additions among the Red Blacks receiving group was they say it's a good collection of players, but is there enough speed
Mm.
there? Outside of Khalil Pimpleton, who I think we all agree, especially with a ball in his hand, can really move. Is there? Do you think is that part of the problem? Is that they don't have enough players with enough separation ability to put the ball down the field?
That's, you know, it's a really good question, and I was just trying to envision in my head, on every team around the league, there seems to be one or two guys that are just super explosive that way and can make a big difference when they get the ball in their hands. And you know, I would probably agree. Justin Hardy is not a burner. Eugene Lewis, I don't think, would be in that category either. Brilliant Addison, when he's healthy, kind of the same. So you're probably right. I think the other factor, and as I think of the quarterbacks around the league, I know Drew Brown doesn't have a big arm, and they don't sort of see him as a guy that can, you know, really unleash balls down the field. You look at some of the quarterbacks in this league that do have those big arms, and it's kind of a combination of that with the explosive receiver and the quarterback with the ability to get the ball out there. So I think you got a combination of those two things, and that's where you have to find ways. I think, you know, I watched, trying to think which game it was, where there was two or three. I think it was the Saskatchewan game this week where they ran a couple of double moves, you know, to huge benefit, and getting guys wide open down the field. And I haven't really seen much of that kind of thing. So you don't need to be a super fast guy to run a good double move. So yeah, to me, it's maybe a combination. They don't have a lot of pure speed guys, and then Drew Brown isn't maybe capable of getting the ball
Right.
out there like some of the other quarterbacks do.
Do you think, just in observing the 7 games that we've seen so far, that opposition defenses are kind of sitting on roots? They're sort of like playing back and saying, okay, you can throw it in front of us. You're not going to be
Mm-hmm.
able to complete it over top of us. And at some point, especially in a 3-down league, at some point, all it takes is one misfire, one
Yep.
drop, and you're punting again. Like, do you think
Mm-hmm.
that's the way they're being defended?
Well, that's been really the evolution of defenses in this league, I would say, for the last maybe 5 to 10 years, where coordinators recognize that, you know, for the most part, exactly to your point, it's really tough to string together 8 or 10 or 12 plays without a mistake and always be in second and medium or second and short. You're going to maybe take a sack, maybe get a drop, maybe take a penalty, and now you're behind the sticks, and it makes it really hard to do that. So I think that's probably the modus operandi of most defensive coordinators in the league. And so I think there's some fairness to that. And I think if you look at Ottawa, right, for the first 7 games, and they've lost games because they've shot themselves in the foot. And one of the big ways they've done that is offensive penalties, pre-snap penalties, obviously holding penalties, sacks, you know, just negative plays that have, I think, I don't know, have the stats in front of me, but I would guess that they've had maybe the higher, you know, top 2 or 3 in the league on second and long, and or first and long, right? And it's really hard to convert in those situations. So yeah, it's a combination of that, and those are the things that the players do really have to fix. You can't have a pre-snap penalty on 1st and 10 and put yourself in 1st and 15.
Talking Red Blacks with Duke Ellingson. They'll play Calgary at TD Place on Thursday night. Do you think the Red Blacks offense functions better with Adebaboye at running back or William Stanback?
You asked some good questions. Yeah, you know what? I think what's been clear for whatever reason, is Adebayoye has been more productive. His rushing average yards per rush is higher. I think he's had the lion's share of the few explosive running plays that they've had. Obviously, part of that is always going to link to the ratio, and I think if they can find that right mix, and I know they like Bennett Williams at safety as an example, playing an American back there when they get the offensive line injuries out of the way, maybe they are going to need to stick with that and use Stanback as, the change-up guy, because right now he just hasn't been as productive. Is that age? Is that just the way the plays have been called and the guys who had or who's had the opportunity? But Adebayoye has just been purely a better back and a more productive back, and that's probably something they're talking about over the bye week. Is what are we going to do with that? You got a veteran, unfortunately, in the league who, gets paid a lot of money, and I think it's September 1st or August 1st used to be the date for veterans to get cut without having to pay the rest of their year's salary. So that's probably a conversation, honestly, that has come up, is what do we do with William Stanback, even if we get the ratio figured out.
Should Red Blacks fans expect, given sort of a week of self-scouting, some hard conversations, it sounds like, if you listen to Bob Dice, between the coaches, should we expect to see significantly, not results, I'll say process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Should we see a different process starting this Thursday?
Absolutely. I think you will, and I think the players probably came back to some revised messaging, both in terms of the play calling and how they're going to go about, schematically, both offensively and defensively. There may be some guys maybe playing in sort of different spots, but I think they're also going to be a message about the responsibility and the accountability of the players. Penalties, big plays, in the right moments, right? I mean, this league, if you watched a lot of the games this week, they all came down pretty much in the last 3 minutes. And that's where the good teams will make the plays and or not make the mistakes. And that's incumbent on the players. I mean, yes, you have to put them in the right spot, but they've got to perform, and they've got to make good decisions, and they've got to make a play when they're called upon. So I think there's going to be a lot more, I'm hoping, just a message of accountability. And you've heard Sean Burke say it. You've heard Bob Dice say it. When you're down a bunch of players, it's not as simple as just cutting a guy for taking a bad penalty. But when you get all your bodies back and you're healthy, you maybe have some opportunities to do that. So I hope the players come back to new messaging, both in terms of what they're expected from an accountability standpoint and what the game call or the game plan and management is going to look like going into Thursday.
All right, let's end with, because this has mostly been a lot of navel gazing and not necessarily positivity. I kind of look at the league right now, and I watched Hamilton come back on BC last night. Like Hamilton, we just saw them a couple of weeks in a row here with Ottawa. They look like a really good team. They look like a well-coached team. They look like a team that's playing hard. Like they've got and Montreal. I know Davis Alexander is injured. They appear to be able to. They find a way, right? They're a find a way team right now, but good talent. So there's two really good teams in the East. Are you a believer of anyone as a for sure really great team out west, or is the CFL right now a couple of good teams, a lot in the meaty middle, and Ottawa right now at the bottom, but certainly more than capable of making up some lost ground?
Well, I think to answer your question directly, I think Saskatchewan is a really good team that would be on par in my mind, just because I think they have a tremendous defense, and Trevor Harris is playing at a really high level. If he stays healthy, they're going to be very good. And I think Hamilton and Montreal, as you pointed out, are also in that category. Calgary, I think, just has gotten off to a great start. I think if Vernon Adams is out, it's going to be a huge benefit on Thursday, potentially, for Ottawa, that they might not have to play against Calgary's starting quarterback, and that would change things dramatically. But no, I think Calgary's still, despite the record, a bit of a work in progress. And so, I don't think there's a lot of great teams. I think Toronto, I watched them again the other night. I mean, Arbuckle has still, I think, been pretty darn good. And they've got a wealth of great receivers. And I think if Chad Kelly, who knows now if he ever is going to come back, but if he does, they're going to be, a tough out. So I think Ottawa's still got a huge hill to climb in terms of getting back in the playoff race. And I'll tell you what, it couldn't have been a worse week for them being off. I mean, Montreal won, Hamilton won, Toronto won. I mean, could not have been a worse, right? They lost ground to all three teams in the East without even playing. So
yeah, it might be a crossover, Duke. Might be their best hope. Might be the crossover.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, BC's, I don't understand what they did last night at the end of the game there defensively. Obviously, Winnipeg has just got a whole bunch of injury problems, and they just don't look like themselves. And I mean, Edmonton is very similar to Ottawa. So you're right. I mean, it could go the other way, but bottom line is, Sean Burke would say this: if they're going to have even a sniff at the playoffs, they're going to have to win at least 6 of their last 11, maybe 7, to get in. And again, that's going to be a tall order.